fantastic, lovely man who's worked with the best, and I mean the best. It's absolutely a joy to have Robert Gillespie on the Pod Blast today. Welcome along, Robert. It's a pleasure to have you on here.
Well, very, very nice to be with you. I'm sure I shall enjoy it.
Absolutely. It's, as I was saying, as we were chatting beforehand, it's just, just such a joy to have you on here because you've been on so many TV shows, so many films. And I mean, I'm sure you've got a few stories to tell.
Well, go on. What would you like me to tell?
I know.
Well, I've just told you a couple, all of which are real. And the last one about the Klansman, my namesake, you will find in the book. Yeah. So
totally, and that was fantastic. I mean, I think there's lots of Bobby Robertsons. I mean, I know so many people here with the same name as me, Robert Robertson, it's unbelievable, Robert. Honestly, it's unbelievable. But but going back to your film work and stuff, I mean, you've got an excellent CV, and obviously TV and film. But I mean, you started off in the theatre. I mean, you worked in theatre. I mean, you did the Old Vic for a couple of years, didn't you? I mean, do you have any recollections of that?
Well, the thing was, again, people have mixed feelings about RADA, and RADA, when I went there, which was a long time ago, and as I now realize, was the end of the man who was then running it, and he'd been running it for about 40 years, and he was no longer at his best. And I expected, because I was then living just south of Manchester, and when I got into RADA, I expected a temple of art, and in fact, it was really a money-making racket. And one of the interesting things about that period in history is that people my height, for instance, couldn't fall in love, and therefore they couldn't play normal people. So at RADA, again, which I write about in the first book, the preliminary to this one, I write about my experiences and adventures there. But as a result, I carefully manipulated so that I got the showy young character parts. Of course, I had to play old men because old people, everybody played old men then. But I could never play a romantic lead. And so they didn't have many expectations for me when I left RADA. And they were even sort of muttering things about, of course, you could go to rep, and of course you could start as a stage manager, blah, blah, blah. I saw on the notice board an advertisement for auditions at the Old Vic. So I just applied. I said, it was my last term or whatever. So I went along, and a little bit later they said, yes, well, we can take you on. So when I walked into RADA saying, by the way, no, I'm not going to rep, I'm not doing it, I'm going to the Old Vic, jaws all around me dropped because they didn't expect that to happen to me. Fantastic. And of course, in my first season, headed by Richard Burton, Claire Bloom, Michael Hordern, Faye Compton, etc. So, and of course, I was there for 2 years. And after that was Paul Rogers, Ann Todd, Virginia McKenna, So it was an extraordinary leap into top flight theatre with no expectations, nobody expecting me to do that kind of thing. So it was very interesting. But again, a theatre company, the quality of it, as I even knew then, depends very much on the boss and how he runs it. And the man who got the privilege of doing all of Shakespeare over 5, which turned into 7 years, he was a very shy man, but nevertheless he was the boss, and he wasn't fully in control. And as a result, the company split into factions. So there was some wonderful work. There's a man called Michael Hordern, who was one of the finest, especially comic actors that has ever been, playing Malvolio, Parolis, and things like that.
Fantastic actor.
But wonderful actor. But the company wasn't the happiest in the end, because the quality of the work was uneven. And of course, I don't know if you know what you know about Richard Burton, but he's a kind of, you know, a law unto himself, he was.
He was a bit of a maverick, eh?
Oh, absolutely. And if he didn't like something, if he didn't agree with something, you know, he'd just not go that way. And so, and he was the kind of bloke, because he was a, you know, dominant male. He collected a clan around him, you know, a little faction around him, and different. So there were about 4 or 5 factions within the company, groups of people that got on together, and so it was a bit like that. Quite different when I eventually went to the RSC unexpectedly in the 90s. Absolute perfection. It was just actor magic, you know, just paradise. But it's an interesting experience. And again, I write about that in quite a bit of detail, because I think a lot of people won't know about that early history. I've lived so long that it's a period thing that I doubt if there are perhaps any actors alive who were in that company who can talk about theatre at the time. And that was one of the reasons I wrote the book, so that people get a flavour how much have changed, and in my view, how much has got better. It's got you lot are doing much better than we did.
I think nowadays, just with how things are, especially with internet and just with social media, things have been kind of made a little bit better, I reckon, for like the younger. I mean, especially younger than me, because I mean, I'm a couple of years away from 50, Robert, you know. But you know, people in their 20s and early 20s and stuff like that, I think things are more easier for them, you know, than what was, say, in your time when you worked in RSC. But when you worked in RSC, I mean, that must have been thrilling, but it must have been nerve-wracking for you as well. You know, I mean, were you not quite nervous?
Well, no. Where? The Vic or the RSC? Where?
Oh no, so I'm saying, like, when like years ago, like when you went to the RSC, I mean, were you quite nervous?
Well, the RSC was in the 90s. The old Vic was 1953.
Yes.
So that was literally my first job.
Yeah.
That was the first job I had. And from that point of view, I was absolutely shattered that I could have walked straight out of drama school with 2 years at one of the most famous theatres in the world. So that was wonderful. But the quality of the work was up and down.
Yeah.
Some of it was brilliant, and some of it. When I eventually went to the RSC in the 90s, because all that time, I mean, I'm known for being in sitcom. That's why people know me. Yeah. They don't know me for much else, and certainly not theatre. But out of the blue, completely unexpectedly, my agent said they've lost somebody at the RSC, has dropped out in their first week. Are you interested? So I went along. I said yes. I said, as long as I refuse to understudy, but otherwise fine. And the point was, the contrast with the old Vic was absolutely magical, because for one thing, the company was incredibly talented, but they were also very lovely people. They're all support. There wasn't, I was there. I was with them for about 2.5 years, and there wasn't a cross word spoken.
Fantastic.
Between the actors. I mean, there was one row, and that was between an actor and a director. But that was the only row. Well, 2.5 years I was there. So it was absolutely magical. And the work was incredible quality. People like Alex Jennings, Seligoni, and so on. Wonderful people.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's an amazing contrast. And Tony Britton, of course. You'll have seen him in sitcom.
Oh, absolutely. Robin, is it Robin's Nest in that, isn't it?
That's right. Well, he played Sir Toby Belch and I was in that production with him. We had scenes together a certain amount, and it was wonderful to chat to him in the wings, because I first saw Tony when I was 15 at the Library Theatre, Manchester,
Really?
when he was 25. And I said to him, you know, I first saw you as a lad before I was an actor, when I was still at school. And so it was a wonderful time. The RSC was wonderful.
Fantastic. So, I mean, all those years, I mean, obviously you've done TV and films, but I mean, would you have preferred theatres to, say, maybe film or television?
Well, you're an actor. I don't know about you. You take what you can get. And the thing that characterized it for me, that was my height.
Mm-hmm.
If I tried to go on, because I did a certain amount of rep, quite a bit of rep. No, I've only been in one West End theatre show. And if I had just restricted my work to, I will only do theatre stage work, you wouldn't be talking to me today. Because I'd have been, first of all, I'd have started at the age of 19, 20, playing old men, for, you know, just like, and understudying. I mean, they used to cast 20-year-olds in the West End to play 70-year-old colonels. It was outrageous. It wasn't worth the money. It was you know, that's what the theatre was like. You couldn't imagine it now. You couldn't, completely crazy. You couldn't imagine it now. So I'd have been stuck either playing, you know, little supporting parts, or, you know, and so I knew that was difficult. It would have been lovely, but it was difficult. I mean, in my own mind, I thought I wouldn't mind a career in classical theatre, but there was no career in classical theatre. And again, my height meant that I would only play funny, bent, you know, tortured little parts, or little character parts on the side and understudy. So television seemed more promising. And I began, because for schools television, there was a particular guy cast me in leads. Because on television, it doesn't really matter how tall you are. You know, you can't tell so much. And there was a clue there. And then by sheer accident, my first agent, because for 9 years, I worked without an agent. I just listed up the telephone and got my own work. But then I got an agent, and she sent me along to see David Croft. And that changed my life, because he wanted somebody to play, as it was. I went because he had heard I could do a French accent. And so I was that long-suffering kind of police desk clerk that says, with idiots coming in, you know, and saying, dealing with idiots. So that he started me off in that, in sitcom, and in that pattern of doing things. And in a way, I wouldn't have had a career without Liftoff, because after that, people saw that. And the key thing that mattered to other directors was that I seemed to get people to laugh. That's all they cared about. They would cast me in something, and if I got the laughs, somebody else would cast me. And so that's why it's not from choice. Well, I don't know, you may think you could choose what you do, but I did what was available to me, and it very quickly became clear that the only medium and field in which I could work steadily and eventually have somebody thought of writing a series for me was situation comedy. But the fascinating thing is, as a result, I played a lot of very different characters, which I would never have played on stage, because only for one reason. They said, maybe if this is a slightly fun, odd script, I tell you what, hire Robert, maybe he can make it funny.
That's really interesting, that as well, because I love watching all the old comedies from like the 70s, 80s, and especially, one of my favorites is Steptoe and Son. And when you watch Harry H. Corbett, who's fantastic in it. I mean, he was like he wanted to be like a real straight, and he apparently was a really great straight
He
actor.
was. I
But
saw him.
but I mean, he got lots of laughs, and he was kind of, I'd say he was maybe a little bit stuck, wasn't he? Just where he was.
There are lots of examples like that. I
Mhm,
mean, I knew Harry slightly.
mhm,
On his 31st birthday,
mhm.
we happened to meet and we went on a pub crawl because he was celebrating the fact that now the army couldn't recruit him. Apparently, he'd been in Burma at the age of 18 as a whatever, but he never wanted to be near the army again.
Mhm,
And so we went, but he was a fantastic brain. He
mhm.
was wonderful to talk to
Oh
because,
yeah.
this socialist ideas pouring out of him and changing the world and all that.
Mhm,
But I'd seen him on stage playing very serious classical roles, and he was
mhm,
absolutely magical because he was unusual. He didn't play them as expected. He
mhm,
brought something to them, but just like everybody else, he wanted to work, and he wanted.
mhm,
To, I mean, the lowest thing you want to pay the rent.
mhm,
So he realized that people picked him up to do that, and of course
mhm,
he became a star as a result.
mhm.
I mean, who's going to say no to that?
Exactly. And I mean, it was fantastic. I mean, if I'm ever having a bad day, I mean, one of the things I do is I stick on some step to son because it is fantastic. It's
It is.
fantastic. But going back to like when you started off, Robert, I mean, see, like when you started off going like working for the old Vic and stuff. I mean, what was the response from your family? I mean, did you get any support from your family or
My mother, who was Hungarian,
that? Hmm.
she was totally behind me. She loved it. She loved the thought of my becoming an actor. My father, of course, who was more of a practical Canadian, he was an accountant, essentially a factory accountant, and he was wobbly about it.
Hmm.
But my mother was the dominant person in the family anyway,
Hmm.
and by and large, I mean, he was not the sort of person who would. He wasn't a heavy father,
Hmm.
He was not like a. So I mean, he had his doubts, but no way did they get in the way. No,
Hmm.
and they were wonderfully generous. I mean, we were one of the early families after the war that had a car, and he because he worked in Trafford Park in Manchester, and they had company cars. He got a very cheap deal on a used car, and we had a car, and he was very happy he was very generous. He sat me, helped, taught me to drive and everything. And when I was at RADA, again partly pushed by my mother, he said, "Let Robert have the car, or let Bobby have the car." And so I was one of the very few students on quite a few terms, and I was able to take my close friends from class, and we would go out at the weekends to see shows and see heritage sites and things like that. So it was a very generous parents, really.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I mean, obviously, the most popular thing, especially years ago, one of the obstacles is normally if you're like working class roots, especially. And I mean, my dad, he worked on the docks for years. He worked down in Leith Docks in Edinburgh for so many years. And he wanted me to work with him once I left school. And obviously, it never happened because he got made redundant. I started my own theatre company at a young age and toured up and down the country doing different like Terry Pratchett shows and stuff. And I got to meet Terry Pratchett, which was a
Oh,
thrill as well.
really?
Oh yeah, lovely
Oh,
man. I actually met him, like we toured it. We went to Brighton and the theatre we were performing in, it was a tiny, tiny theatre. You're talking maybe 20 seats in this theatre. And it was opposite. You've got the big Taj Mahal building down in Brighton. It's like a big Taj Mahal building. And right opposite there, the theatre was like on the first floor above a gay bar. And it was just mental, because in this gay bar, it must have been a bit rough, because there's been a few times we heard the door getting kicked in, and we heard some fighting and some colourful language, you know. So, I mean, I played the part of Death, and there was a few bits where Death was going to go on the stage and frighten everyone. And then just before I'm about to go on the stage, you just heard some doors getting kicked in, and the surprise was ruined. And I thought, you know, typical. But yeah, but going back to the working class thing, it was, I mean, my dad and my mum, they weren't really up for me doing that type of thing. But that was back then. But I'm glad I stuck by it just now. And yeah, it's just, that's normally the thing. Just sometimes you get people try to get swayed not to do it. But that's just one of those things, Robert. What I was going to say to you as well is, it's like, you obviously, apart from acting, I mean, you do quite a bit of writing, and you obviously you've wrote some books, but you wrote like did you write some material like years ago, especially for like different like comedy shows, or is it sketch shows and stuff like that?
Well, just that was the week that was.
Yes.
Do you remember that? Did you ever?
That was before my time, but I did.
Before your time, exactly.
But I did.
Have you ever seen any clips of it?
Yeah, was that not David Frost not in that one?
Yes, David Frost was the main front man.
Yeah.
It was run by Ned Sherrin, who was a great guy, and he had the thing was that they obviously, a show like that, they absolutely gobbled up writing material. They needed tons and tons of it, because as you can imagine, with writing, 95% of it won't work. So you've got to have a lot of it to choose from. And so somebody I knew, not particularly well, but an acquaintance, who desperately wanted to get on the show as an actor. And Ned, who was a very kind man, actually, very shrewd and very sharp, but very kind, said, actually, what we need is writing. And I think it was his idea, Ned's idea. He said, we'd like somebody to do the equivalent of a witch report on religion. And this guy said, this is what he said. And he was very, very low in the spirits. And he says, I don't know what to do about this. And I heard this idea, and I said, that is the most wonderful idea I've probably ever heard of. He said, oh, well, in that case, would you like to collaborate with me on? Anyway, the upshot was, typical of this particular guy, he started having doubts. So he wrote what was in fact a satire on the Witch magazine. And I spent through a night, about 4 hours on a kitchen table, writing the sketch that became a consumer's guide to religions. And it shook the nation. There were questions in the House of Commons. There were priests preaching against it from the pulpit. And there was a huge row, which was fantastic, because it's exactly, of course, what TW3 wanted. And it was great for me. I was in rep at the time, and I was just doing this on the side, And as a result, they asked for more pieces. And so I ended up writing about 5-6 pieces for them. But, I was never that kind of comedy writer. I'm not... it's not quite my bag. You need somebody like Brian Cook and Johnny Mortimer to do that. They come up with these. It's a very particular style of writing. But if it's the thing about the Consumer's Guide is that it's become a classic, and it gets repeated. Little chunks get repeated, as an example. So I was very pleased with that, and of course I just love the idea. We listed 6 religions and included communism, which I reckoned was a religion because it was, impossible. So that was the main. That's what I'm. If I'm known for any writing, it's that. and otherwise it's writing I've done for myself. But I was writing from even, primary school and onwards for myself. And I wrote a lot at school, because whenever there was an exam, instead of on the English paper, I always took the opportunity to pick the item that would let me write a story. So I always wrote a story in my exams. So I've always written. And now, but the books came up because my partner Anna said, because we have a daughter, but I was 50 odd when she arrived, so she missed a lot of my life in the theatre. So Anna said, "Why don't you put some of this down?" And that's how it started, and it turned into 2 books.
Fantastic. And the thing is, it's like, I mean, when you do writing, it's, I've wrote a couple of short films, and to me, I'm chuffed with that, and I'm writing a book. I'm writing my first book just now as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, fiction or?
A bit of both.
Oh, right.
I've added a little bit in it, but it'll maybe take another. I'm not just nearly halfway through it, but I'll give it another year or so. Anyway, but I'm looking forward to getting it all done and stuff.
Well, good luck with it.
And I'll let you know when it's all done.
Right.
But yeah, but it's always, I never thought I would be doing anything like that, but then once I got started in my first short film, I thought, I enjoyed doing that. I did another one, and then I thought, I'm going to do a book. One of the things I really want to do, and it's funny you mentioned it, like theatre and stuff, I'd love to write my own play one day. I would love to write my own play. That's one of the things that I really want to do. But,
in fact, to interrupt you,
yeah.
I ended up writing a couple of things, but we're going to launch a website very soon. I'll let you know about it.
Cool. Let me know.
But you'll find stuff on there which refers to comparatively recent writing for the stage. One was a 2-hander, which I toured with an actress. We used to do just single performances around the home counties in London, etc. Anyway, I won't elaborate on that, but there was a bit more writing, which if you get my second book, I cover it quite fully there.
Fantastic.
Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, no, it's just more or less I'm just saying that it's just I never thought I'd be doing any like writing, especially not just now, but I just like once I've started the first short film, then I thought I'm going to do it. I'm addicted now. I'm addicted to writing. I haven't wrote so much.
Excellent. You have to be addicted, because otherwise most people don't write, because they get very bored very quickly. Exactly. But once you start and you're into it, you can't let go, can you?
Oh, exactly. I mean, how many books have you did now? You've did quite.
Oh, no. So that's why I mentioned I wrote, the comedy sketch, and a few others, and then recently I wrote these stage pieces. One's called Love ? Which examines the whole issue of monogamy and marriage, which again I directed, and a man and a woman played. And then I did this other 2-hander, which I played with an actress playing nine other parts. But I won't, as I say, I suggest we leave that and just advise people to buy the book, because they'll find all about it in there.
What was that called? Was it Love, Hate and Death or something?
No, Love ?
Love ? But had the three things. Death was one of them, wasn't it?
Love ? is about monogamy and marriage, really. And the other one was called My Heart, which is about a guy, me, waiting by the telephone for news of his heart transplant. And the phone keeps ringing. Of course, it's never the call he wants. Gets stupid. Somebody's looking. Is that the pet hospital? And but I get visited by kind of ghosts, and they were all played by one woman, one actress.
Ah,
And so if somebody facing death,
mhm.
not imminently, but
Yeah.
wanting to know about it,
Yeah.
and having ex-lovers come in, scientists, you know, Catholic nuns, that kind of thing.
Sounds really colourful. Fantastic.
Well, it's nice, yes. You know, it's available to perform if you want to perform it.
You know, it's just, you know, it's when you see something like that, I mean, on stage would just be fantastic. You know, something
Well,
original and different.
yeah.
You know, and good on you for doing for right. I mean, you know, I mean, when you do theatre and then to actually perform it and tour it, I mean, it's very satisfying, isn't it? Especially if you wrote it.
It is, yes, yes.
Mm. Now, jumping from theatre, Robert, we're going into films and stuff. And I tell you what, I mean, you've just got such an impressive CV on films. I mean, starting from Force 10 from Navarone, I mean, God, the stars in that was unbelievable. I mean,
Was that the one with Robert Shaw in it?
Robert Shaw and Harrison Ford.
That's right, yes.
Mhm.
Well, I was only on that very briefly.
Yeah.
You know, what, I have to be frank and straightforward about it. I never majored in movies.
Mhm.
I think my most most screen time was in in the Pride section of the magnificent Seven Deadly Sins,
Mhm.
Graham Stark's film.
Mhm.
Have you ever seen that?
I've never saw that. I haven't
Oh,
seen it.
you never seen it?
I'd love to see
Well,
it.
it'll be well. There's a nice. There is a scene. He did all the sins. He did the
Mhm.
seven sins, and I was in Pride, which is, I think, quite a good one. And it's about, it's got Alfie Bass in it, and I forget his name. About a small car, a very narrow alley, small car driving up it one day, posh guy driving up it, up it the other, and then both the AA and the RAC having to sort it out.
Mhm.
You probably, I suspect, if you click on YouTube, you might find it.
Yeah.
It's called. The film was called It was the Seven Deadly Sins, but Graham insisted on putting magnificent over the top of it. So it's the Magnificent Seven Deadly Sins.
Yeah.
And that was my longest amount of screen time. Otherwise, it's just little cameos and little bits, you know. And so what I remember about Force 10 from Navarone is this walk I did with Robert Shaw, and then he had a scene. And it was quite painful because you know about Robert Shaw, don't you?
Oh, I love Robert Shaw. I absolutely love him.
No, but he was an alcoholic.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
Right. Well, that was my strongest memory from that movie, because he was the star I met, as it were, and I admired him enormously, both as a writer and as an actor. But he would do the scene with me, and then he'd end up with this scene with the others, and you could feel the tension because he'd get into the scene and then he'd fluff. And they'd quietly say, all right, we'd better do that again. And you could feel that there was pain on both sides. He knew that he wasn't up to speed himself. And it was a bit hit or miss whether he'd do a take without messing it up.
That's
And
mental.
eventually they did 4 or 5. They didn't do that many because they knew that if they went on, it would get worse. So around about 4, take whatever it was, 3 or 4, it was okay. And they said that's fine, okay. Next, let's set up. And so, so that's what I remember about that movie, because I think it was it was shot in the Channel Islands or something like that, wasn't it? I'm not sure. I have a feeling it was.
But I mean, it's been a while since I've actually saw it. But I mean, Robert Shaw. I mean, we all love him in Jaws. You know, he's
Oh, he was wonderful. I mean, this is a sad thing about. I don't know how many alcoholics you've known,
mhm,
but I've known quite a few,
mhm,
and often very, very talented and gifted people
mm,
who destroy themselves.
yeah.
It's terrible.
I mean, you hear the stories. I mean, obviously, I mean, I grew up hearing the stories of the likes of Richard Harris and Peter O'Toole and all those guys, and Oliver Reed,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's just such a shame.
Well,
Talented people.
well, Burton in the end, he
Mhm,
died far too early. I mean,
mhm.
Richard Burton died far too
Oh, he
early
was a fantastic. I mean, he was.
because he was on everything by the end.
It's sad to hear. But then it's like moving on from that. I mean, you were in Jesus of Nazareth. I mean, how did you enjoy doing that? I mean, did you enjoy working on
Oh, oh, well, that was wonderful
that?
because that's a job I got myself. I didn't have an agent, and the fascinating thing is at that time, and this is what I think is very interesting
Mhm,
historically,
mhm,
is that if you had played in the classics for 2 years,
mhm,
but the whole business was changing, television, etc. If you said, I've been at the Old Vic, and you wanted to do um, a naturalistic part in a film or telly, uh, people used to sort of pack off because they thought you'd come on and say, the carriage awaits or something, you see. They couldn't believe that you could be ordinary, normal, and natural because you'd been at the Old Vic.
mhm,
That's gone now. You can go to the National now and go straight into a television studio, but you couldn't then.
mhm.
And so it was maddening because I'd done 2 years at one of the most famous theatres in the world, and I began to not be able to talk about it. So I said, I've been working for 2 years. Where? What do I say? And I had to sort of fudge it. And it was, you could see the suspicion come into people's eyes. You used to say, well, it was at the Old Vic, actually. I was there for 2 years. Oh, I see. What did you play? And then it's called my best parts were old men. My best part in the second season was an 80-year-old Adam in As You Like It. And I was 20. I was 20. I was playing 80. So you can see that it's not a good selling point, is it?
No.
So so I had to pick up the phone, and one day I used to steel myself to do this. Sit by the phone and said, right, this is the day, and at that time you could get a contacts book with all the producers' numbers. They're called producers, they're not directors, in the book.
Mhm,
And I rang this office at the BBC, and there used to be three replies. One was, "Oh, sorry, we're not casting at the moment. Sorry, I don't think you're likely to be suitable." And
mhm.
this one, she said, "Are you in Spotlight?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "Oh, yes. Possible. Come in on Tuesday." So I went to see a woman called Joy Harrington. And again, I was about, I don't know, 23 or something.
Mhm.
But she said, yes, of course, everybody who works around Jesus has got a beard. So she kind of said, yes, yes, because I could, I could always play older.
Mhm.
So I ended up being cast 10, 15 years older than myself in a fabulous part because I was the disciple Matthew. I
Mhm.
was one of the leads. So I couldn't believe it. Almost my first television was playing a leading part, but again, as a very heavy character. So I was he's the money changer, isn't he? Matthew in the Bible, I think.
And the thing,
He's the money man. He's dodgy.
oh, totally. But I mean,
It was absolutely.
going back to Jesus of Nazareth. I mean, I remember watching that when I was still at primary school, I think, and I remember it being on the TV. And my mum said, and she actually got me to watch it, and I thought this is really good, and it was just fantastic. And
Tom Fleming, of course. Did you ever meet Tom Fleming?
no, 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 no.
Because of course he was a great Scottish actor. You
Mhm.
remember?
Mhm.
and and eventually commentator. He was, I think there was a bit about him that there was, I suspect, a couple of days in the week when he thought he might be Jesus. He had that air about him. He was kind of above everything. A fascinating guy, you know. No dirty jokes, no, but not boring, not boring.
Yeah.
He was a very interesting man, Tom Fleming, very interesting man. And of course, that show went out live. Did you realize that?
No, no.
It was live.
Was it
There were
really?
there were film inserts, but that went out live at 6 o'clock in the evening.
I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. Wow. I've heard little stories about Robert Powell when he was dressed up as Jesus, and some of the people that were around, wherever it was, at Malta where you were filming about.
Can't remember.
It was somewhere like Malta or somewhere, and he was dressed out like Jesus in the white robe and stuff. And I think some of the locals actually thought it was Jesus, and they were like going, like they were crossing themselves and going, going on their knees and praying and stuff. And he's like looking at them as if to say, what's happening here type thing. But I mean, you worked with Robert Powell as well in the 39 Steps, didn't you? 39 Steps.
I think you could say I nearly worked with him, because I was hired for that film, started on it, but the company was warned that I'd already been booked at a certain date for another film, and they got behind. And so I did a bit of my part, and then I just said, my agent, I had an agent by then, and she said, he's got to leave because he's contracted to another company. And so somebody else completed that film, vaguely in my character. They said, no, okay, we'll get somebody else to do it. And in fact, there was a kind of a gathering, celebration of that film, funny enough, at the back of the house, in the House of Commons, where Robert Powell attended. I went there. The John Buchan Society, that's what it was, because it's his story. And so I was invited, and I said, when they invited me, I said, that I didn't complete that film. They said, don't laugh. Doesn't matter, come along. So that's when I saw Robert Powell, probably mainly because I wasn't on it long enough,
Oh wow.
I'm credited, but I'm there, but I don't complete my role.
That's just unheard of. That's something like that. But I mean, just being there, I mean, you must have met some really interesting people on that shoot,
Well, the thing is that if it's well run, I don't know about you, maybe you find that there's time to hang about and talk to people, but you tend to be told when to arrive, where you're waiting, when you'll be made up, and then they want to get on with it. And I found that unless it runs over, which obviously happened, and you find yourself down in the canteen and whatever. And of course, you've got to remember about status. Status is less important now, much less important than very important back then. And it didn't go away for a long time. If you were just a bit player, you did not sit and lunch with Robert Powell. No way. No way.
That's crazy. It's just like, I mean, nowadays, obviously, you'll get your main players, and then you'll get your extras who maybe get kind of herded around, but like maybe have their food, but after the main actors and stuff like that, But yeah, but it would have been interesting just to sit with him while he was in his Jesus outfit.
It wouldn't have happened. The thing is that there's a story I tell in my first book about Richard Burton, because we went on tour. We took Hamlet to Elsinore and played it, and we had, I thought, a wonderful hotel. It was just after the war, but the food was fantastic. And because they thought we were all mates, they arranged one long table. They put a whole lot of tables together with the idea that we would all sit anywhere, company of maybe 30 actors. It worked. The very first night we all sat there, and already, you know, Richard and Claire would make sure they'd seek each other out, and Faye and so on. And it became uneasy very quickly. And then the second night, Richard blew up, screamed at everybody. What kind of rubbish food is this? Why can't we have fish and chips? Or, you know, why can't we have some decent British food? Turned over the table. And after that, we all had separate tables.
Oh.
And all the rubbish at the bottom of the company, the walk-ons and the people with one line, all sat together. And then it went up the tables with the middling players, and then the stars were on the one table, just 6 of them. So that gives you a proper picture of what the theatre's really like and how people actually behave. And the reason I think it doesn't persist anymore, and I think it's very interesting, because stage actors don't become stars in the way that people like Richard Burton, Faye Compton, etc. could in their day. Stage stars were supreme. You were also film stars if you could get the work, but stage stars were very important. Now, you know, film stars, TV stars are at the top of the heap, and stage stars are just kind of, well, they're your mates really.
Yeah.
And so that's changed now. And so you would find that somebody like Cumberbatch might well sit next to you and not mind. But in the old days, he would have minded.
You know, it's really kind of ironic. We're talking about theatre, and you know, and the thing was, it's like I had a little discussion with a couple of my friends, and we were going on. But it started off by talking about, you know, how you get these action films nowadays. You know, you get the Fast and the Furious and all those type of films. And it's, you know, you've got actors like Vin Diesel, even get guys like Vinnie Jones and that are making lots of money being in these big action blockbusters. But the thing is, to me, I think personally, a part of an actor's education is theatre. And, you know, I don't think some of these guys have did any theatre before, you know. And so it'd be good.
No, that's right.
You know?
Oh, no, absolutely, absolutely. You can go straight into television, straight into films. No, in fact, that, you know, the theatre is now just one of the media that you can work in. But it was paramount and very prominent on where you started when I started. And as a result, there was a tremendous hierarchy and a class distinction all the way through, right from the top to the bottom of the company.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right, moving on to, like, obviously when you went on to do like TV and especially the sitcoms and stuff, and obviously, I mean, you did a lot of TV stuff like the Sweeney and all those fantastic shows like the New Avengers, but then you went into like work on programs like get a little part on Rise and Damp and then Porridge. I mean, what was it like to actually work with guys such as Leonard Rossiter and Ronnie Barker? I mean, these guys were just fantastic.
Well, I'm regularly asked about Len because he apparently acquired a reputation for being difficult. And I've, in my book launch and in the book as well, I describe in Rising Down, especially the gas man scene, how without him, that scene would not have worked. But because he, starting during rehearsal and then all of the recording day, he approached the management, the props people, the director, saying he wanted this for the coins to be this way and that, which I describe in detail in my book. And I realized then, and of course, the crew on the floor, I could see their eyes beginning to roll and up, And I thought, what are they? This man's trying to get this right. The point was, it's a funny scene, isn't it?
Oh, brilliant. Absolutely fantastic.
We did that in one take. No
Really?
retakes on that. And that's entirely because of Leonard. If Leonard hadn't done his work on that day, and even the way it was shot, it wouldn't have come out like that. So, and I worked with him once more on that Reggie Perryman, and I knew him slightly socially.
Mm-hmm.
To me, he was a great guy, absolutely, very funny, very sharp, and a brilliant actor. And to me, go on.
I mean, I actually heard that he was like a fitness fanatic as well. I mean, he liked playing squash, didn't he? He liked to squash.
Well, I think that's what I gather. That's what killed him. I believe soon after he played squash, he had an attack. That's what I've been told anyway. No, but to me, he was a wonderful man. But he wasn't cuddly. Wasn't cuddly at all. Whereas, of course, the other guy you mentioned,
Ronnie Barker.
Ronnie. Ronnie was entirely cuddly. Ronnie was one of the just warmest, easygoing, funny people ever. And the funny thing is, he always had authority, so he worked another way. But it was just because he knew what he was talking about, and of course, he was a superb actor.
Oh, brilliant! Absolutely fantastic.
If he started straight, because I did quite a bit of schools television with him, same director, and he cast Ron. And in fact, this same guy, Ronald Eyre, wrote a play in which he cast Ronnie Barker as the lead. And I've still got the script, actually. And Ronnie was absolutely magical in that. So he completely different kinds of people, but in my view, both enormously talented and great to know. Ronnie was just. You just walk into a room and it's like you were mates. Terribly easygoing. Lennon was always quite high octane and feverish, but very, very pleasant, but bird-like and dashing around. Whereas Ronnie was entirely placid and calm and everything.
It's like when you talk about Leonard Rossiter, I don't know, I keep on imagining him as being quite a hyperactive guy. Is he quite hyperactive?
He was. Oh, yes, he was. Oh, yes, he was. But I mean, to me, and always extremely pleasant and very entertaining.
Fantastic. And Ronnie, I grew up watching the two of them, and honestly, they crack me up every time I watch their shows, especially Porridge and Rising Dam. Absolutely fantastic, Robert. But that leads me on to, like, say, when you went on to do Keep It in the Family. I loved that show. I thought you were fantastic in it. And I mean, it was just a lovely, lovely show and made me laugh, made my family laugh. And, what are your memories about that? I mean, did you have any good memories from that?
Yes, they were pretty well all good, because I got to the stage where I was doing a lot of situation comedy. And as I explain in the book and elsewhere, Brian Cook just came up to me one day and said, "Do you fancy fronting a series?" And I said, "Well, I don't mind." And so he said, "Well, I got this idea for a manic depressive, you." And so it went from there. And when I didn't think I fitted the description of manic depressive, but I could see what he meant, that I could be up and sort of all over the place, and then gloomy. And so he thought, and very interesting, one of the interesting things about it was, when I got the first script, I looked at it and I said, "What do I do with this? Who is this guy?" I said, "How do I play Dudley?" And I had 10 minutes of panic. And I asked around, and my partner, Anna, said, "Well, it's you." It just, I wasn't used to playing me. I had never played myself in my life till then. And he said, "Well, it is you. He's caught you very well." And I asked Brian, he said, "No, but it's you."
Brilliant.
So once I got into that, I sort of calmed down, and I realized, I said, "Oh, well, I just behave like me, and that, with some discipline, of course, some technique, in other words." But I realized that, and what I loved about it was that he wrote a happy relationship with Pauline Yates. I was very pleased about that, because we often started a show in bed, and sending each other up, and I liked that, because I thought George and Mildred was a bit, I wouldn't have liked to be George, but I liked being Dudley, because he got on with his wife.
You know what was really funny was it when I was having my breakfast this morning, and like when I was thinking about us talking, the tune for that sitcom, I could actually hear it in my head, like so I could actually hear the wee tune in my head. And but I mean, in your cast as well, I mean, you had people, especially like Sabina Franklin as well, and
they all tended to be theatrical, because Stacey's father's an actor. I think, in fact, both her parents were actors. Sabina Franklin was daughter of a very good actor. So, and Jenny Quayle, who started the series. Of course, Anthony Quayle was her father, one of the Royal Shakespeare greats.
Yeah. Sabina Franklin, I think I remember her dad being on the TV back in the day. Did you not have like a comedy show as well? It was like a...
to me, I remember him as a straight actor. He did a lot of work. He was very solidly in work.
Right, because I'm sure I kind of maybe picture someone his name was Franklin, but he kind of came on every now and then on the TV as well.
Oh, yes. Now there was a little short man who was also called Franklin, I think. He was a character actor, but Sabina's father was pretty straight. I mean, played leading roles, as far as I can remember.
And it's funny that Sabina was in Keeping the Family, because I could always kind of picture her in Fawlty Towers when the rat was in her bag and they're under the table, and the guy who plays her boyfriend, and it's thinking they're looking at her legs and stuff. That's brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. Brilliant. But but leaving on that, I'm just thinking to myself, what would have been like to have, I mean, going back to like Ronnie Barker and Leonard Rossiter, it must have been such a thrill for you to work with these guys. And see, once you worked with them, I mean, when you worked on Keeping the Family, did you feel you maybe, every time I saw you on TV, I mean, you always made us laugh. But do you feel you maybe kind of learnt a bit from them as well? Like comedy wise?
Well, you if you're open to it, you can't stop yourself learning, But a lot of it, the strange thing about comedy is it's very difficult to describe what one does.
Yeah,
a lot of it is an instinct, because I remember making my schoolmates laugh in class. I don't remember a thing we ever said. But I do remember that I made them laugh, and I don't know why.
Yeah,
I actually don't know why. And so that's something about that, that kind of one finds one can do, the thing. But I mean, I'm a great, I've always watched. I mean, one of my greatest models, if you want to model, was Michael Hordern playing Malvolio in Twelfth Night in my very first job, because he's the greatest Malvolio probably anyone will ever see.
Mhm.
The comic invention in that was absolutely amazing.
Brilliant.
Because I was in Twelfth Night with the RSC many years later when Desmond Barrett played Malvolio, and he was very, very good. But I remember we drove back from Stratford one night because Desmond doesn't drive, and so I would schlep him back to London, and so we had nearly 2 hours to talk. And he said, "You were at the Vig and you saw Michael." I said, "Yes." To me, Michael Hordern's Malvolio was definitive. So he said, "Tell me, what did you do? How did you play?" Because he was playing Malvolio, you see. So it was very interesting. I think most actors like sharing things like that.
Yeah.
You know, because you're constantly learning, really.
Yeah, and they maybe like to maybe do it their own way, different from.
Oh, absolutely,
what
absolutely.
You know, well, I tell you what, Robert. Honestly, today's just been absolutely fantastic. It's been
a pleasure,
and you know, it's just been taking me back to like a lot of the things which I mean, I still regard myself as as a young man, you know, but it's like I mean, I do remember. I mean, lots of these great programs years ago, and seeing you on it, as I say over and over again, seeing you in something like in these shows, it was all part of growing up, and you know, it was maybe one of the reasons why I always wanted to be an actor as well, and I thank you for it, you know. But you know, all I can say, Robert, is you know, thanks very much for coming on. You know,
it's a great pleasure, and I hope it goes well. And presumably, you're going to edit it. Is that what you do, or?
Yeah, I don't think it'll need much editing because I just do it raw. It's like a raw thing, you know. It's to me, and it's you know, but it's going to be good. I know it is. And you've been fantastic in it. And all I can say,
yeah,
sorry,
go on.
On you go.
Go on.
And you know, it's just been great having you on this. You know, and just
well, it's been a pleasure. I really mean that. You know, no pain at all of any kind. Very enjoyable.
Absolutely, Robert. Well, listen, all I can say is you have a fantastic weekend, and let me know about the book of like.
Well, it's out now, and
right.
In fact, you can buy both. You can buy both books. There are links, a lot of Twitter links,
Right.
and all over the place to help buy the book, and you can get the other book on Amazon.
Perfect. Well, I'll do that because. I mean, I'm being honest. I'm saying I'd love to write my own like theatre play one day, and that could give me a few pointers, which would be great, you know. So, but listen, thank you so much, Robert Gillespie.
Pleasure.
Pleasure meeting you, and have a fantastic weekend.
Same to you.
Okay, bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.